This is a summary of the 5 finalists who contributed to the Workforce Innovation Award this year. And this is our second year to do this award. We had 5 amazing teams. But what we heard last year was great. We heard who won, but none of the membership got to really hear or see all of the ideas. So this was thanks to your feedback. We are bringing their expertise to you. So I'm Beth Harper. I'm the Workforce Innovation Officer for ACRP. So I've been getting to do lots of interesting things and see what's happening in terms of innovation in the workforce. But our teams are really the people in the trenches who are making this come to life. So I'm going to just briefly share a little bit about what the award is about, how we went about evaluating this, and then really we're going to turn it over to the teams. We had 5 finalists. Unfortunately, only 3 teams are here to be able to present, but the full deck of all of their slides and presentations are included in the download, so you can at least see them, get their contact information, find out, and so forth. We have the conference app open for a Q&A, so as you go through, if you want to log your questions, we'll take those at the end. Each team will have 10 or so minutes to present. We'll sort of move along, but then leave questions until the end. But feel free to start logging questions so you don't lose sight as you go through. So the Workforce Innovation Award is really designed to recognize those organizations that are taking competency-based approaches or really rethinking how to enhance the quality of their workforce, the professionalization of their workforce, and the career development of their staff. So that's really what the spirit of the award is. And so there's an application process that goes through a review with our staff. And then we come to a short list of finalists. This year, the finalists presented in a Shark Tank style presentation to our Workforce Innovation Steering Committee, we call the WISC. And they voted on the presentations. And then that sort of led to our award winner. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But the 5 finalist teams are Lawson Health Research Institute. Janet will be here to share what they've done. NYU Langone Health and Lois and Melissa will be here to share what they've done. And then Duke University, Denise and her team will be sharing what they've done. The 2 other organizations that weren't here but included their slides are Washington University in St. Louis and Clinical Trials of Texas. So again, we'll just briefly give everyone a chance to present, capture your ideas, the questions you have for them, and then we'll open it up at the end for questions. So with that, let me invite Janet Knechtel up. Janet is with Lawson Health Research Institute, and she is going to share all of the great innovations they've done. So welcome, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's your little gizmo.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Alicia and Himanshi are my colleagues, and they were co-creators of our project. They couldn't be here today. Alicia just had a baby last Friday, so she's a little busy, and Himanshi's back at the office kind of holding down the fort for us. So, but we were all part of this project. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Lawson. Lawson is one of the largest hospital-based research institutes in Canada. We have 7 hospital sites across the city. We have about 500 new clinical trials happening each year, and we have over 1,800 clinical research staff and students. And we also have, maybe about 1,000 more from the university that we're associated with Western University. Prior to 2012, we had standard operating procedures where we just had a binder with them all printed off, and everybody kind of read them and signed the paper saying that they did it. But they didn't. I think people just signed the paper, and we started our QA program about that time, and we found out that a lot of people were really missing the basics. And even though you comply with GCP, the standard operating's kind of fill in those blanks of the day-to-day. So In 2012, we thought, okay, we're going to implement mandatory training. And at the time, we offered what were really dry, boring, in-person training sessions. It took about 4.5 hours to complete. So, as you can imagine, we got a lot of really bad negative feedback about these sessions. The physicians didn't really have time to come to the sessions. So we thought we can do this better. We need to find a better solution. But we really needed to tackle the 3 main issues. And I think the first one was, how do we make it fun? Because really, this is the look I got, if not worse, most of the time when we were doing the training sessions. The other one was, how do we reduce the amount of time spent training, like 4.5 hours. We did it 3 Fridays a month, an hour and a half each. There was an exam, and people had to come kind of to our Lawson boardroom to do it. We did offer some other sessions across the city, but for the most part it was in our office, so it took a lot of time for them to come. And then same thing, like how do we make it accessible from anywhere at any time? So we thought, well, every other mandatory hospital training is on our hospital website via the web. So we thought we'll submit it to our learning development department and just see what they say. So they said yes. And then the real work begins, right? So we worked with Cindy, our amazing instructional designer, and we went through lots of failed ideas. But then we thought we're going to settle on an animated training video. Their department had done a lot of research on what appeals to the younger people coming in, and animated avatar videos were quite popular, so we thought we'll do that. So we used a program called Go Animate. Then we started to create characters for each of our research roles. And this is where the fun part comes in. We kind of did a play on the words. So researcher is our researcher. Compliance, he's our research coordinator. And we threw this one in, James Lind. We thought, okay, if people really know their clinical research, they're going to know who James Lind is, but I don't know if anybody at our institution really does or not. So once we had the characters created, and we gave them each a unique voice within the Go Animate program, we had to create a storyboard for each scene of the video. So it's an interactive video. So we went through this for every single scenario throughout the course of the research project. So we kind of knew, we brought this animated idea to our manager, and she's like, you know what, we have like physicians that are 100 years old and they're not going to like this. And one in particular that I can think of that was cranky about everything. So we have an advisory group made up of physicians that oversees our quality management program. So we brought the idea to them, and it was kind of like, hey, you know, why don't we get our VP of Research, create a little avatar of him. So this is Dr. David Hill, and he actually recorded his own voice. We didn't use one of the animated voices. We got him to record his own voice for the welcome message and to explain why it's so important. And there's the real Dr. Hill. So I think we did a pretty good job, and the red tie is his signature look. So we gave him red tie. Originally we had a green one to kind of go with our Lawson colors, and he says, no, I need my red tie. So we gave him the red tie. So then we started out with the history of clinical trials, and we thought that was really important. Maybe if people understood where we came from, that they would buy into the module a little bit more. And then we kind of went through the compliance framework, explained how we got our standard operating procedures, what all the rules are, and how they all work together. And then each scene or part of the video, we started out with our study startup activities, patient visit, and that's our patient, Mrs. Wanda Get Better. And then we had a whole section on pharmacy procedures. We have a lot of investigator-initiated clinical trials where they don't realize that they have to actually keep track of their drugs. So we have a whole section on that. And we had lab procedures as well. That's where our James Lind came in. And study closeout and archiving. And then throughout the module, because we had adopted our standard operating procedures kind of from our Canadian national organization, we needed to have some testing throughout it. So we had some interactive drag and drop type things, but we also had quizzes throughout to test knowledge in each section. And we divided it out into 3 different sections. So then once we were done, we had to put it onto our hospital e-learning platforms. And we had one for the physicians, fellows, residents, one for Lund Health Sciences Center staff, and then one for our St. Joseph's Healthcare staff. But then we had a lot of people from the university that didn't have access to our hospital platforms. So we had or students that hadn't really started on yet. So we have an external link as well, and anybody can access it via that link. And it prints out a certificate. The external link one, actually we did create a database where as soon as they complete it, their name goes into a database automatically so that we can track that they've completed it. And then anything that's on the hospital website or hospital platforms is right on their training profile, just like all of their other hand washing or whatever hospital mandated training. So it's a really great way for us to track it as well. So we, of course, think we had amazing results. We were able to reduce the amount of time spent on training. We went from the 4.5 hours in person to a 45-minute video. Might take a little longer for people that aren't really as familiar, but the ones that are really knowledgeable in GCP and our standard operating procedures could go through it in 45 minutes. And then it was amazing how many people actually completed it once they didn't have to come across the city. The blue is before, so we averaged about 30 people in our in-person training sessions. And this, I think you can see September when we had kind of the influx of students, and that was when we really started saying, no, we need to see it tracked on our portal in September. So I think we had, I don't know, over 250 anyways. It was insane. So we've actually had now over 1,500 since July 2017 complete the module. So it's just amazing for us. So one of the things we had to think about when we were doing the presentation for the Innovation Awards was to what extent, if any, did we incorporate the Joint Task Force Harmonized Competency Guidelines? And I said I really had no idea because I didn't really know what they were, to be honest. But once I had a chance to look at them, I thought, you know what, wow, we really nailed it. We actually incorporated 7 of the 8. And I think that's partly just because everything that's in our standard operating procedures is part of that core competency and, GCP and things like that. So we actually did pretty good. And I think, partly just because there's the key core competency in there, it's really going to enhance our competency across the board. And our module was more scenario-based, so it wasn't just linear for each standard operating procedure. We walked people through, like I said, that startup, and we showed them how to do things. So some of our newer research staff that didn't really understand the workflows, really appreciated the video. So one of the other things was our lessons learned. And like I said, it's like keep alcohol in your desk because it's a really long, it was a really long year, and we really, some days really needed that drink. But, so collaboration and communication were key. We had a lot of different perspectives. We had a lot of brainstorming sessions, but really each person's perspective was so valuable in ensuring that our module was what we wanted it to be and needed it to be, and we really looked at the big picture there. So finally, one of the things was if we would recommend it to other sites, it's really be patient, and it's okay to go down all of those other paths and think, hey, yeah, this is a great idea, and then start on it and think, no, you know what, that's not a great idea. Let's start again. And we did that a lot before we got to where we wanted to be. So I guess we don't want questions now, right?
We'll hold questions, but thank you so much, Janet. That was fantastic. So we will definitely come back to questions, but if you're in the conference app, if you go to this session, there's the link, and you can start typing in any of your Q&As that will appear later. So thank you so much, Janet. So interesting, and I have about 6 questions myself. So with that, next, let me invite Lois and Melissa from NYU, and they have a different take on some workforce innovation. And ladies, welcome. So thank you.
I'm Lois Mannon. I'm Director of Research Enterprise Training, and this is Melissa Kendrick, Senior Educational Specialist. So our innovation is a learning and development ecosystem for our clinical research workforce. So prior to 2012, our organization didn't offer a lot of support for our clinical research workforce there. Suddenly there was an issue, right? Increasing trial complexity, very uneven training, and high staff turnover. And I think that a lot of organizations can relate to these problems. What we imagined was a scalable solution that goes way beyond solving these 3 issues. We imagined an ecosystem that identifies both our existing and newly hired staff, that would deliver robust training, improves professional development, and does so throughout our employee life cycle while creating a community among peers. So we went big. We really swung for the fences here. Let's do something really good. We've got nothing. Let's start by making it an opportunity that can go on throughout the employee's life cycle. So it was our design to empower this group so that they could tell us as an organization what they needed to be successful now and in the future changing environment. So here's how we did it. Thank you. Here's how we did it. We engaged department leadership and their existing CRCs. So that means we met with 63 different centers, units, and departments face to face. We did that because I wanted to make it personal. I wanted to get good feedback, and by far everyone had the same top priority problem: training. They couldn't get people who were really knowledgeable of what was required in their job. These employees became the basis of what we call ACRP, our Internal Association of Clinical Coordination and Research Management. This organization is inclusive of all levels and all roles of the workforce, all levels and all roles. So even though I refer to CRCs, I'm talking research data associates, project managers. Every single title is included in this association. This group's first achievement was the creation of a 2-day CRC boot camp, and then they decided to make that program mandatory at the point of onboarding, and again, regardless of roles or study type. So our CRC boot camp is Transliterate recognized GCP. It is 12 courses. There is a 100-question test. They must pass with 80%. I collect surveys from them, and then a month later from their supervisors. Did that employee show more confidence in their role, more ability to understand the organization? After we did that, and we made it mandatory at the point of onboarding, we also made it so that the moment they take this class, they become part of the association. Now, the association allows us to have a list of everyone who is doing clinical research, not only for training, communications, updates, but also to get their feedback about what needs to be improved on the ground. They're the ones who know what problems really exist, not those of us at the top of the institution. So this achieves our initial objectives: identification of the cohort. We can't see. Delivery of the standardized education. And then automatically captures our personnel in that career in ACRM so that we can share with them career opportunities, support systems, and their peer network. So collectively, we get this organization together twice a year, and we get them to tell us what their pain points are, and then we deliver on 3 goals a year with their help. Right? So these goals typically end up in the buckets of educational, professional development, and community. I know this is a little hard to see. Sorry. Yeah. What happened here, Beth? Okay, we're good? We're never good. We're good. Okay. All right, so go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, you're going to have trouble reading this, but...
Oh, no, good. Some weight.
Okay, all right, but that's then and now. So... this is 7 years of metrics. ACRM's membership has gone from 198 to 698, health system-wide, throughout NYU. Improvement projects, those are the pain points that they have told us they need, 31 completed projects. These projects benefit our workforce and their development, but also benefit the organization as a whole. Research certification among this group has risen from 16 to 22%, and that's tied directly to professional development. We have observed reduced turnover, first in CRCs that have 2 or more years of experience. The turnover rate has gone from a high of 21% to a current rate of approximately 17%. And if we unpack this group further, so if we look at those employees right out of college, come into their first research job, may or may not stay in the field, we actually hit a high of 35% turnover. And now it is at 17.9. And these numbers have held for 2 straight years. Now, turnover rates and certification rates, they tell a story. But individually, it's better to look at the aggregate. So another essential key indicator is morale and satisfaction, right? That's one of the reasons people turn over in the job. In 2012, when we started this, 62% indicated they were dissatisfied with their role and did not feel valued by the institution or their investigators. And in 2018, another survey revealed that they are now feeling satisfied. 74% say they are satisfied and even intend on staying in their role another 2 years. So like I said, these metrics alone may not mean a lot, but when you look at them in aggregate, they definitely fall into the plan of not just education and training and support systems and career opportunities. So these indicate adoption of our ecosystem across the entire employee life cycle and throughout the institution.
Our initiative enhances clinical trial competency by providing standardized training. Although our boot camp predates the JTF competency guidelines, it retrofits well into domains 2 through 8. The JTF standards are now regularly used as a benchmark for improving and developing our training projects. Note that Domain 1 is a PI function at our institution, and we have a separate training program for that group. Professional development opportunities provide fundamental to skilled levels of JTF domains 4 through 8, and in the community bucket, especially in leadership and communication domains. The primary roles impacted by this effort are all levels of the workforce, from data management and regulatory to coordinators, nurses, and administrators. Our PIs are also impacted by having a staff with a minimum standard of knowledge. This is what we've learned. To be successful, you need organizational will in the form of senior leadership who recognize the challenge and its importance, and to create value for the membership by driving their yearly goals and establishing trust with the community. Recommendations for other institutions would be that this ecosystem could be adapted to the strengths and challenges of any other type of research organization and is not exclusive to academia. We would like to acknowledge our contributors to this presentation and leave you with our 31 completed research improvement projects. Thank you.
Some of which you can't read.
You can't read. I'm sorry about the slides. Sorry about that. I could drop a white so the template just ruined all the slides.
I know. I am going to go back and try and fix and make sure that everyone has access
They were
to
so good.
I know. Technology. So we'll make sure that gets fixed and uploaded so you have the full picture. So thank you, Lois and Melissa. And then last but not least, another organization that's been on quite a journey. So I think Lois and Melissa started in 2019, and Denise, you and your team probably about the same time, or 2012, I'm sorry. So
we started this part in 14, but I restarted the whole office
in 12. Yeah. So with that, please welcome the Duke team, Denise and Rebecca and Debbie, if you're moral support in the background. Okay. Welcome.
Yeah, poor Debbie had to speak yesterday.
Okay.
So I'm Denise Snyder, and this has been my voice for the conference. I think, I don't know if it's a special gift I've received from ACRP, but thank you very much. It's really awesome. But I don't usually sound like this. I kind of like the deep voice, but I don't feel like feeling poorly. So, yeah.
It's okay. We're good at animating, so we're good.
We are. Are we good? We are. Good. So anyway, workforce engagement and resilience. How many of you came to our talk yesterday? Okay. So this won't be too redundant, but there will be a few pop-up slides in here that we made a little bit even more exciting by the time we got to the Shark Tank presentations for these. So, all right. So the problem. All right. So what I felt like is we have a problem, not just at Duke. We have a problem in clinical research, and it's around quality. And we knew we had a fragmented infrastructure. I'm sure many of you can relate to this. Inexperienced staff and high turnover. All right. And high turnover for me was anecdotal because I didn't really have any people I could actually track and figure out, like, who are we talking about? It was really just watching what was coming through our office because my team does a ton of training. So I run a pretty large research support office. There are probably 70 FTEs in our office. They're not all paid for by Duke School of Medicine. It's really important to understand that we've sort of built a really good central team, but also is paid for in other areas, including our CTSA. So anyway, we think this all leads to poor research quality. And then this was our solution. We really wanted to transform the clinical research workforce. And when we discovered the JTF framework, which that publication came out in like 2013, I think, Rebecca and I got a hold of that and we were like, finally, we have some documentation of something that's going to give us information to the leadership to say, we really need to do something about this. And it's not just a problem at Duke. You know, I often say that to our leaders. Hey, this is not just us. I just think we're really responsible for being a leader in this. We're a very large academic clinical research institution. So we really needed to do something, and finding the JTF competency-based framework was just icing on the cake for me because I have been championing this since I had taken over the office in 2012. Where we had to really start, though, is you have to understand the level of engagement of multiple stakeholders. I mean, I can think of, there are probably hundreds of people that I have met with across Duke in order to do this project. So it's not 10, it's hundreds. Hundreds of individual meetings, some big group meetings, special meetings, leadership meetings, clinical chairs, business managers, clinical business managers, all business managers. It's just so many people that I had to talk to about this project, all during different phases, too. It wasn't sort of like, hey, we're going to do this, and everyone went, yes. We'll see you in 5 years. It wasn't like that at all. We had to repeatedly come back to those meetings and kind of update everybody on progress so we could continue to keep the momentum going. Because the other thing is, once you engage the stakeholders in the ad hoc work groups, which is essentially your research community, and you start talking about this, even though there might be some reservation, like you're going to do something to my job, what? There's also that hope. And as soon as you put the hope out there, if you don't do something with it, all of your credit has gone down the tubes. And I knew that because I'd watched a project sort of like this at a much smaller scale try to be done in probably 2005, 2006 when I was in the nursing school. So anyway, I kind of knew if you start to put it out there, you can't not follow through on it. So we knew we had to keep the energy going. So there's really a core group of individuals who made this happen. It isn't just me and a mouthpiece. I'm the talker. I'm the person out there like buying coffee and pizza and having big town halls and making sure everybody's connected. But it took someone like Rebecca Brower, who really, as a team lead of this project, really would hunker down with everybody and say, okay, you're doing this, you got this going. I had subject matter experts like Debbie and many of the research practice managers in all our clinical departments really committed to giving us time. We had research community, senior level coordinators, people who had been there a long time who contributed. So trying to engage as much volunteer work too from within the community gave us some buy-in too, because they felt like they were part of it. They had a say. It doesn't necessarily mean it always made a lot of sense, but it certainly was really part of that whole engagement process. But the core group here, and Christine Dieter, who's not here with us today, is the coordinator of all the crazy that goes on behind this, because this is the main project. But if you were in my session yesterday, we have spun out so many different other pieces from this project. So I'm going to let Rebecca talk a little bit about the components of the We Are initiative in this next few slides.
What's more amazing than winning the award is that we got through this in 5 minutes. I'm just going to say.
I probably just did 5 minutes.
You did. I was watching. So I'm actually going to try and summarize roughly 4 years in about 5 slides. And those of you that came to the talk yesterday, I'm focusing more on what was accomplished kind of not in the past. I mean, a lot of it is still ongoing, but not as much on what we're working on sort of in the future. So like Denise mentioned, finding the wheel was amazing. So as you probably know, it's got domains, it's got an individual competency, roughly 4 to 12 under each domain, but it's a flat competency. It's one sentence. And the first thing we did is we said, if we're going to be applying this to our workforce, people aren't all at that level, right? Sometimes you need to be the person that does it with some coaching or supervision. Maybe you're someone, like take consent, for example. You might be able to do something with a minimal risk study. That's down here. You might be doing it for really complex, multi-PI, interventions. You may also be the person overseeing and training it. And even above that, you might be the person helping set institutional policy around it. So we took each of those, all of the competencies, and we leveled them anywhere from 3 to 5 levels. And by the way, to speak to Denise's thing about engaging the research community, we had work groups, we had sessions with people voting. We had pulled together probably 100 people, I think, to make that happen, and it probably took close to a year. I mean, this was no joke. So great. Now we've got these levels, and we mixed and matched them in ways that made sense, and ended up with a total of 12 job classifications. I know you probably can't read it all that well from where you're sitting, but we had a regulatory coordinator track. We had a clinical research nurse coordinator track. This is kind of the CRC track that has a few more levels, and then we added a research program leader, which is like a high-level project manager. So we have these, some of these are tiered, I'll get into that in a minute. But to get people, to get these levels into that, we ended up really just using the sentences and formulating the job descriptions. One thing that is not on the slide, and we hadn't mentioned actually when we did our Shark Tank, is that now what we do if somebody wants to take a job, if I'm a manager and I want to hire someone, I as a manager fill out exactly what level I want someone to do. I hit submit, and it goes through what's called our title picker. So now it does sort of an automated match. It's like, okay, don't pick this title because you want to pay someone $47,000 a year. It now says, what do you need? Okay, it matches with this job. So that's been a really good improvement to our process. So, okay, we've got the 12 new job classifications, but the way we were back in I guess it was early 2016 is prior to our mapping exercise. We had 750 people or so that were in 80 job descriptions. We needed to get them from there into here. In order to do that, they basically took almost what's our title picker now. They said, hey, you complete this survey. Tell us what level do you operate in all of these competencies, or do you even have it as part of your job? We did have the managers look it over. They have a little bit more of a bird's eye view and adjust it if necessary, but it essentially then mapped them into the new jobs. One of the things we did, by the way, some of these 80 titles still exist. Some people were sitting in like a staff assistant position. So the staff assistant position at Duke did not go away, but we no longer put people that are engaged in research in those jobs. But I do think we got rid of maybe 15 or 20 jobs, so they don't even exist at Duke anymore. Okay, so now we have our 700 and some people in these new jobs. Like I mentioned, some of those are tiered. 64% of our workforce sits in these tiered buckets. Your CRC, your REG coordinator, your research nurse coordinator, and your research program leader. They needed a little bit of opportunity to move. So we created the opportunity for tiers, which is essentially a way to show that you operate at a what we called a fundamental, a skilled, and advanced level. In fact, if you look now at the JTF wheel, if you go to that website, they've actually gone through now leveling as well, and they use the same thing we did. So you take a standardized assessment. Some of them are direct observation, some of them are case studies, some of them are knowledge tests. We've got 5 different modes. And then you can gain a certain number of points. 1 point if you're fundamental, 2 points if you're skilled, 4 points if you are advanced. And if you hit certain thresholds, then you can basically move into the tier. So I think Denise had mentioned that we get some of our funding from our CTSA. So from the get-go, we were all about making sure that this could be shared widely. So every single one of you sitting in this room can go pull down every single assessment we have. You can look at what we have as our self-assessment to see sort of where am I with my tiers. It's all there. It uses REDCap, and we use Microsoft Office. So we have also all of our publications on the website. Anything you should need is available there. So Denise is going to come talk. I think she's going to show you some numbers, a few of them that we're pretty excited about.
All right, so I'm a big data head. I love data. If you don't use data, you need to use data. Data tells your story. It backs you up. It can't just be like, oh, hey, I've got some anecdotal information for you. Nobody believes that, so it's really important that you start from the very beginning and tracking and trending your data. So finally, it's so nice to actually have some data that's actually from a period of time. Since we started this project in July of 2014, we mapped in September of 2016, we really started to say, okay, now we can track our research community. We know who they are. We know what they're doing.
Good luck.
What was that? Oh.
Good luck, that's it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you got to remember.
I don't even remember what our 3 things were.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Yeah, you can find the people, you can target training.
Yeah. What's this? Oh, transforming the job classifications. At least I can see what's out there. So it's supposed to be, we are transferring the job classifications. So we know who they are. They're appropriately classified. And I forget what the target is.
We can target the training.
Targeting the training, which is something I say all the time, and I forget what the last thing is, too. Do you remember that?
We're just really smart.
Okay. So that's kind of sad that we don't remember this
we can target our communications.
That's it. Yeah, I can always reach out to the people. I know who they are, so I can find you. And you can actually get a message from our office. And before, we really couldn't really find you. And this actually became really, really important in our newest, and I don't know how many of you were at my other talk about our implementation, our large-scale implementation of our clinical research management system that also ended up interfacing with our IRB system, which also got overhauled at the same time. And those were big deals. And so by having a research community defined, we could really start to think about role-based training for access to our clinical research management system and things like that. So anyway, I can't speak enough about identification of who it is that you are actually responsible for and creating a community. I have been very big on people matter. And if we can make all the really clever systems we want, but if we actually don't pay attention to the people who are actually doing the job and supporting them and giving them resources and really helping them feel like they matter and that they're part of a bigger picture than them, it's really not going to make that much of a difference. We're still going to have quality problems. So infrastructure is important to fix. Getting some leadership in place is very important, to have somebody who can champion and really help engage the other resources at your institution to make sure that people are aware of what it is that you're trying to do. But you absolutely have to care about the people that are doing the work, which is many of you that are sitting in the audience. Many of us, I've been a coordinator. I've been there with no resources, and it's not a fun place to be. I'm very resourceful, and so I find my information, but there has to be a better way to do that. So we are learning about our workforce. We're finding out, where are their challenges? Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? Where are the things that we probably need to hone in on training? We've been exchanging emails with our team today about just some areas of just how do you do it at Duke, right? How many of you have a training that sort of says, hey, this is how you do this here? Right? We had a training like that before. It used to be required on top of GCP and everything else that we had to require. And we ended up letting it go for a little while. And what we're finding is GCP is covering GCP, and that's all great. But they still need to figure out how do you work with the institutional policies and where do they exist and all of those kinds of things. So we're going to bring that back along with some of the things that we're learning from the results and some of the assessments that people are taking during chair advancement. We are creating career ladders. So Rebecca had the different job classifications and kind of the different positions and the ladders that sort of gives people a reason to come in and stay at Duke. We've been looking at some of our retention data, and if we can get people past the 2-year mark, they stay. They stay for a little while. That's kind of cool. And that actually will cost us less money in turning people over and things like that. So we've had 116 employees attempt tier advancement at this point, and 77% of them have successfully advanced at least one tier. And you can see the breakdown of those positions here. And we are reshaping our workforce. What this is really telling you is we never had a clinical research project manager type position, so that's our research program leader. And once we introduced that job, it's been on the rise. There's been an uptake of 2% of folks, more folks ending up in that job classification, which is actually a good thing. I'm hearing from faculty that was a missing piece. I mean, we didn't have somebody who could really take a portfolio of NIH science and really manage it for one or two or multiple investigators and really operationalize those studies. And those things are very important. So we're not just doing industry-sponsored research. We do NIH and other types of clinical research. What are you laughing about?
I'm laughing at what the slide looks like. I'm sorry.
She's like, over here, I sit down while you're presenting. You're like hovering over my shoulder. It's like really uncomfortable.
She's giving you the hook.
I'm giving you the
So,
hook.
all right, so 23%, our attrition rate's gone from 23% to 11%.
Yep.
Since mapping. So we were able to go back and kind of call together some old data to try to come up with what that rate was once we had identified the individuals that we pre-mapped to mapping. All right, and then lastly, we are sharing our information. So we have 5 publications, 13 presentations, and 26 different organizations that we've talked to about this. There are some in the throes of really adopting this, and others that are really up against some challenges in the HR space. So it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. All right, we are moving forward. We're looking at things related to staffing. So that's going to be things like optimized hiring, which I talked about in the talk yesterday. And again, that's to get us better matched and find better, the right people that really want to be in these jobs. And then finally, as we think ahead, we really have to think about the data and the metrics, because we want to make sure, as we're professionalizing this position, then we're also improving the quality of the studies and the actual research that's being done, which improves our overall site quality. And hopefully people go, oh, I want to work with Duke. They've got their act together. All right, thank you. I'm done.
Perfect. Thank you. Why don't you stay here? Thank you both. Janet, let me invite you, and Lois, let me invite you back so that you guys are at the mics to take questions. So as you can imagine, all these presentations were incredibly impressive, as were the other two that are included in the slides, but the teams are not here. And what's sort of most appreciated, not only they're sharing their slides, they're sharing their time, but they're also willing to share all those great ideas. Some of the concepts, some of the actual materials are all for you to take advantage of. So thank you to all of our teams, and as Denise mentioned, the Duke team ultimately won the recognition. So everyone, well done and congratulations. And we will be calling for abstracts for next year, so continue to submit your ideas. So I'm going to jump ahead to the hopefully the Q&A here with our social media. But if anyone has a question, please come up to the mic. We are recording the questions, but we'll see what's on the, sorry, just got to advance here. And yeah, we'll see if any questions have emerged here. Otherwise, you are welcome to please come up to the mic. I don't know if anything's coming through yet. Here we go. Couple questions. So, all right, I'm just going to run down the list here. So, Janet, this is for you. Are you still requiring sign off to the individual SOPs?
No, we're not. You're issued a certificate after you do the animated video.
So, certificate after completing that animated training, but no individual sign off. Great, excellent. How long from start to implementation did the process take for creating the e-learning? So I think that's, again, a Janet question.
I think start to finish, it took us about 9 months altogether. Took us, we had a lot of stakeholder meetings as well, talked to a lot of coordinator groups, try to figure out what their needs were. And then once we started working with Cindy on implementing it, we actually started with kind of the end first, and then we went to the beginning, and then the middle, the core conduct piece really took a long time.
Yeah, interesting. But about 9 months or so in general.
Yeah.
Okay. Terrific. Lois, this is for you. How do you pay for the boot camp? Was there pushback? So you created that 12-week program.
It's actually 12 courses.
12 courses.
2 straight days, and it really is like a boot camp. So how do we pay for it? It's paid for out of regular salary. I teach it for 2 straight days. Melissa assists, and that's what it was incorporated. This was something the institution felt was very important, and we were able to get that done because of the importance.
Awesome, terrific. A couple more questions. Denise, this is for you. Did your work include DCRI, I guess the sister organization?
No, does not include DCRI. This is Duke as a site. That doesn't mean that the future may not include DCRI. There'll be some reorganization. So I think my big vision is that, Duke as a site should become part of what DCRI does. We should be able to grow our folks into multi-site center leaders and coordinating center leaders at the DCRI. You would understand the site a whole heck of a lot more if you actually worked in it. Mm-hmm. So, that's just my opinion, but, so that's the answer.
Oops, fantastic. I don't know if I can get back. Oops. All right, maybe I can pull up the questions here. Oh, do you have it? Okay, perfect. Sorry, let's do that. Okay, I'm trying not to. Okay, perfect. All three presentations touched on not knowing who was in the workforce at your institution, how many people we had, what these roles were. Can you talk about the details of how you found out who each one is? So, well, we just work our way down. So, Janet, did you do anything about sort of trying to identify the people, or was that not necessarily a piece of the project for you?
Not necessarily for our project, but it's definitely on HR's radar. We're in the process as well as creating those new job titles, new job categories, because right now everybody at our site is either a research associate or a research assistant, even though you might be a research nurse or whatever. So they're really working on that, so I'll be wanting to talk to you a little later.
Great.
Tools are shareable.
Right,
Excellent.
right.
Excellent.
Yeah, fantastic.
But no, like we knew who everybody was because they have a unique email address. Like we have a Lawson Research email as opposed to clinical staff that have the LHSC or St. Joe's email. But other than that, we didn't really necessarily know where they worked or what role they really played.
Okay. Lois, how about you?
So in our instance, we worked closely, like my colleagues here have said, nothing happens in a silo. It's 100 meetings and thousands of people. But one of the things we did was work with HR, as well as our initial meetings with every department and unit. Per my presentation, we discussed what kind of titles were doing it, and getting the administration to understand that everyone who touches or engages or works with human subjects or their data needs to be part of the organization and needs to be identified. So that's how we did it. It was a slow process. It was not easy, but we eventually got it done.
We actually started with our IRB. We said, okay, let's call out all the key personnel on our IRB, and then let's start to match that with what our clinical research units knew about their staffing, and see where people fell out. And that's where we would find like staff assistants and folks like that. And a staff assistant might really be a staff assistant, gets listed on a protocol because they're going to file the regulatory annual paperwork for their PI that's in a data analysis only. Now the common rules change that, so that might change processing, but today we have things like that. So there may be very legitimate reasons that folks were showing up. So we didn't just make any assumptions. We just would follow up with those individuals listed and their manager, and try to identify managers across the different clinical research units. We have 21 clinical research units. It's a lot of people to try to find. And when we actually did mapping, we did it in 2 phases. We called them scoops. We scooped people the first time around that we figured them all out. And then it was amazing how many people came out of the woodwork in that second phase of mapping. So we scooped them up then.
Interesting. This is a one for you, Janet. This is specifically to the Go Animate software. It apparently was sold to Viond. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, last year, so a new vendor. Are you moving to a new vendor or a different tool, or will that translate? Do you know anything about the technology?
I don't. Our learning services department actually purchased it for us, and several other departments are now using it as well. One of the things that we were concerned about was what if, the module changed, what if the characters or the voices changed, because even though we would be able to insert or delete out a scene if the procedures changed, we were concerned that we wanted to have the same characters, right? So no, actually I don't really know if any of that's changed.
Great for us to explore because it's such an interesting technology.
We use Go Animate.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, we did all of our encore training in that.
Okay.
So I'm happy to connect folks in with my training group.
Fantastic.
Get you some information about that.
Fantastic. And this may be a good one to wrap up for all of us, for everyone. What's the general educational requirement for an entry-level clinical research position at your institution? So maybe we'll start with you and work our way down.
We absolutely require GCP. Nobody can actually submit anything with your name on it into our IRB without the 13 modules we require for that. Beyond that, then we try to set up more tailored onboarding depending on the individual and the position. And one of the things that we're trying to do is actually centralize some of that activity through our office, so that when people are coming in, we're making sure that happens, as opposed to the manager saying, oh, yeah, I got it. They're going to do onboarding. There are certain things like study documentation, informed consent, depending on what you're doing in terms of your job that we're going to want you to do. But as a central office, we don't say, you must do this, you must do that. We try to leave that up to the different clinical research units, because we don't want to be a heavy hand. And I also don't think fitting a square peg in a round hole is always the best engagement of the staff. And they're going to have more buy-in if it's actually helping them with their actual job, as opposed to, you need all of this because you're in a CRC job. They may or may not, they may have a high concentration of other types of work that doesn't necessarily involve something else. But those two things I think of with like the coordinator.
And then I think that the question, if I was interpreting or may not have read it correctly, what about basic education? Do you require people to have a bachelor's degree? Do they have to have,
So minimum, so that's like, we call those MQs, and meeting certain minimum level of requirements. If you're a coordinator or institution, you can come in with a bachelor's degree and 0 experience. If we want to hire you in as green and train you up, we will do that. And different units are staffed differently in terms of senior level coordinators and being able to mentor and do that. Some units are too small, and something like that could be paralyzing to them. So an associate's degree, and I think it's 2 years of experience, is the other requirement.
Okay.
We don't let anybody come in without having at least an associate's degree into those jobs.
Great, thanks. And Lois, how about you?
For us, it's a bachelor's degree for CRCs. And that's really the scope of your question.
I think that was sort of the gist, like that entry-level role, what's the educational expectations? So bachelor's, okay. And Janet, how about for you?
For us, it's either bachelor's or equivalent experience. We wouldn't want to exclude somebody that didn't have a bachelor's if they had, lots of years of experience. So, and it depends on the job.
Right, of
that we're
course.
hiring for. But most people have bachelor for sure.
Great. Jenna, did I miss anything? Is that everything that came through? Any last-minute questions from the audience at the mic?
I'll just make one more comment, because
Please.
the nurse coordinator is a little bit different. We actually do require a BSN for nursing, and we followed our health system nursing on their requirement there, because they have to be credentialed in the health system, and then they do sometimes do care delivery related activity, drug administration or whatever. So we do require BSN. If they do not have one on hire, they have to declare that they are enrolled in a program within 2 years, and then that is tracked, and they have, I think it's 5 years to get that degree.
Terrific. Well, thank you to all of our finalists, to the other teams, and congratulations. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the program.